Not only will this review actually be approved by Shroud because my VAXEE mice are on my VAXEE Mousepad, but also will this video cover the entire new lineup of the NP-01 and the NP-01S 4K, and at the end of the video I will also go over the VAXEE PB. So if you're at all interested in any of these two mice or the mousepad, definitely stick around because I will cover them as good as I can. Before I get into the video, I wanted to make a quick disclaimer that these two mice and the mousepad were indeed sent out to me. I truly appreciate that, but that will not affect my opinion about these products whatsoever. Also, if you're at all interested in peripheral enthusiast content, definitely make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell right next to it to be notified for any of my upcoming reviews. Getting into the boring stuff, we'll start with the unboxing experience. The packaging is incredibly minimal and very eco-friendly. I freaking love this style, I'm not gonna lie. Of course, it's not the most premium and the most reusable thing ever, but only using recycled materials is definitely insanely based. Inside of the box, you get a USB-A to USB-C cable that is pretty stiff. It does have this login mechanism, and of course with the 4K version, the 4K dongle is included and it is directly paired to the mouse. This is what the dongle looks like, and no, this part doesn't actually detach from the thing itself. It's just an aesthetic thing. And back here, the cable will lock into the dongle. In terms of weight, my stock NP-01 comes in at around 72 grams, and the NP-01S is about 70 grams. Now, these days, this is actually considered pretty heavy, and whilst in tech FPS like CSGO, I wouldn't have a real issue with it. In really fast-paced games like Fortnite, I definitely consider this pretty heavy. You can definitely adapt to it, but I personally didn't really want to, so I did a lot of modding to my NP-01S, and we will talk about this very soon. Now, talking about QC, VAXEE is usually considered the absolute GOAT, and when it comes to the actual outer shell and flex and stuff like that, I have no issues whatsoever, and you could throw this thing against the wall and the wall would probably get hurt. However, when it comes to the actual engineering of the mouse, these days, how this thing is actually made, it doesn't make much sense. When you look inside this mouse, you would definitely think that this mouse would be several years old. Now, you probably won't see this from the same perspective as mine, since I have been opening and modding mice for ages, and it's always very interesting to see how mice are actually engineered. Now, normally there's also a battery cage back here, but I cut this thing out because I wanted to replace a battery with a lighter one, since I was trying to put this mouse down as low as possible without sacrificing QC. But what I find very curious about these mice is the actual inner structure. Using an endoskeleton like this doesn't make much sense to me, because you would think that all of these huge plastic parts that weigh quite a bit would be used for rigidity, but as you can see, that is not the case whatsoever. I do find it an interesting system because you can actually completely differentiate the click system from the base plate, and also the scroll system, of course, so you don't have that issue of inconsistent clicks or scrolls, anything like that, because you're attached to the base plate. So this way it is way easier to absolutely nail the clicks, just like on the OP1, for example, where the clicks are actually attached to the top part of the shell. However, this thing weighs freaking 70 grams, and that is just due to so much unnecessary plastic that is here. I mean, they even have an attachment system for side buttons on the right side, even though this is an asymmetrical mouse. You can see the screw hole for it right here. I really hope that they completely re-engineer this mouse for the lighter weight version later this year, or maybe beginning of next year. I'm not entirely sure, but there will definitely be lighter weight versions in the future, and I really hope that they just completely revamp it, especially because of the clicks. The most annoying part about this endoskeleton is that for the post travel, they have this clip here on the mouse button up here, and that clip will rub directly against this piece of plastic in here. So what you get is a hard piece of plastic rubbing against a hard piece of plastic, and when you move your mouse button side to side, there will be some grinding. I personally find this very annoying, and also because of the way that these clicks are actually engineered, when you click towards the front end of the mouse, there is quite a lot of post travel. So if you're somebody that plays like this, for example, and has your fingers pretty high up in the buttons, you will definitely notice that post travel. And with this OEM mouse, for example, that is engineered completely differently, the issue is not even nearly as bad, and these clicks on the G Hero by Inkit are actually just insanely fucking tight, and they feel night and day compared directly to these VAXEE mice. Now, of course, this is some very picky stuff, but I wanted to give as much feedback as possible for VAXEE, because when they do that lighter weight version in the future and they completely revamp their mouse design, man, they would have some fucking insane mice with these shapes. So yeah, quick feedback to VAXEE. You can probably get rid of this entire endoskeleton and simply mount it to the top shell instead when it comes to the clicks and the main buttons. Of course, you'd have to restructure that top shell, but you would be able to save so much weight. Now, when it comes to the actual shape, if you don't know anything about these two shapes, you've been sleeping underneath a rock. These mice are not ergonomic, they're not symmetrical, but asymmetrical. What that means is that they have this slight adjustment for right-hand users, which in general feels insanely comfortable and very unique. I can especially recommend it for a claw grip since I play a 19x10 aggressive claw. And when it comes to which shape I actually prefer, I do prefer the NP-01S just because of the size difference, since this is a pretty thin mouse that is not too short unlike certain other mice out there. It is just a very, very unique experience. So if this does look appealing for you for this type of claw grip, which is either relaxed because you have that extra length here, and I would say that anybody up until 20x11 could probably relax claw grip this thing, and then if that would be considered too small for you, just go for the NP-01, which should basically cover anybody since it is a decently large size mouse considered the normal standard these days. What I disliked about the original NP-01 and NP-01S series way back in the day was that the thumb spot was kind of curved inwards where you would actually grip the mouse, so your thumb got kind of pushed down and really punished you for putting your thumb a tiny bit in front of the DPI buttons. But they have actually ever since addressed that with these wireless versions, especially this NP-01 is so much better than the original wired version, since this is now completely taken account for and your thumb never feels uncomfortable no matter where I actually place it now. I'm so happy that they fixed that because that is kind of what ruined it for me back in the day when they released their first units. Since this hump also extends over to the right side, since this is an asymmetrical mouse, I can also definitely recommend this for a pincer claw where you can actually support your pincer grip over here, since it does extend over quite a bit. Overall, if you have never tried these shapes and it looks attractive to you, I can definitely recommend trying it out. And I'll also link a file down in the description where you can print a test shape for yourself so that you don't have to spend $150 just to try a shape. The only comparison that I can make is the Inkit G Hero, since this is the only similarly shaped mouse out there, except for the Nifter clone that will also come out very soon. So this is the new G Hero by Inkit, and this mouse sits directly between these two sizes. As you can see, it is slightly wider than the NP-01S, but also slightly shorter and slightly smaller in general compared to the NP-01. So the NP-01 has this very bulky feeling. It is very supportive, but also not too restrictive. Overall, a very comfortable experience, even with my 19x10 aggressive claw grip. I just kind of prefer smaller mice, so that is why I picked the NP-01S over this thing. But yeah, going for the slightly larger size down to the G Hero is just something that I really do enjoy using so far. I've only had this mouse for about a day, but so far, in terms of shape and size, I can definitely recommend this thing, but my review will be out in about a week. So if you're on the fence of getting any of these VAXEE mice and this actually might sound interesting to you, definitely don't pull the trigger yet and wait until my review comes out next week about this thing. As you can see, the G Hero is slightly smaller in every single dimension compared to the NP-01. And then compared to the NP-01S, you can see that it's slightly wider towards the front, but overall very similar. I do feel that it just has this extra width here towards the back and about every single other dimension as well. And holding the NP-01S compared to the G Hero kind of feels like I'm holding a pencil. Now, when it comes to the coating of these mice, VAXEE are simply some of the absolute best in terms of coatings. As you can see on screen, there are several versions of this mouse in all types of colors and they all spot the same coating. From my experience, they don't get greasy whatsoever. They are very grippy as soon as your hands are just slightly warm, and overall just a masterpiece of a coating. Huge props to VAXEE here. Please keep this coating for all your mice in the future. It is simply one of, if not the very best in the entire industry. When it comes to the stock skate experience, you can see that I've already replaced them with some core pads, but since your sensor will be all kind of fucked up if you switch to some aftermarket skates like I did, you definitely need to stick with those stock skates. Jokes aside, the stock skates are these dyed white PTFE skates, so they're a bit more hard. I didn't have real issues with them, but I just didn't like the feel of them, and I prefer something that is really smooth and also not too controlled or too speedy. If you aren't too picky about stock skates, just stick with them, but you can always get some aftermarket skates down the road, so just try them out first. But if you grab some, definitely go for some core pads if you don't know what you want. If you want something faster, there's always the X-Ray Pad Jades, and if you want something slower, just stick with the stock skates, I guess. Now, when it comes to the buttons, of course, we've already talked about the QC. If you press them towards the front, there is quite a lot of post travel. It is not horrible. It is not really annoying in game. There's just some post travel, so keep that in mind. Especially on the NP-01, the bigger size, I have this springy effect here where I have already clicked the click, but I still have a lot to kind of bounce up and down on. But yeah, same goes for the NP-01S, just not entirely as drastic. Other than that, no significant pre-travel. They use the Huano black shell pink dots, which are really awesome. They are a bit on the lighter side of switches, so they're not the most tactile and heavy experience ever, but they're also not as light as the clicks on the Zowie mice, so this is perfect. And the main difference to the U2 is definitely that these have separated click, which just feels so much better than using the entire top shelf for clicks, which just feel poorly tensioned. Then again, I definitely prefer the click system on the G Hero, but that's for another day. In terms of side buttons, they're actually glossy. They're very well tensioned, and I also find the placement fine. Just keep in mind that they're a bit thin, and some people are not a fan of that. The scroll has some very defined steps, but it is not a Zowie scroll that wakes up your neighbor at night. Mouse free is also fine. It is pretty heavy, but I personally didn't have any issues with it in game. And then of course you also have these 3 buttons underneath the mouse, which are used to either determine your DPI, your polling rate, and when all these lights actually light up, it is set to 4K, and if 2 of these light up, it's 2K. And then there's also the debounce time. And in terms of software, there simply isn't any. This is plug and play, and I fucking love it. If you want to change your liftoff distance, there are some weird key combos, so I will make sure to link something down in the description below if you are wondering how you can change your liftoff distance or something like that. I also quickly want to touch on 4K. The 4K saturation seems to be absolutely fine. I don't have any issues on my unit, and you can also get the dongle and update the firmware of your already existing NP-01 or NP-01S wireless, and that 4K dongle will set you back almost 30 euros. If you want to know more about the actual performance when it comes to 4K and saturation and click latency and all sort of stuff, I personally simply can't do any testing that is worth mentioning, so definitely go check out the video by House Gaming if it's up already, since that man is the absolute GOAT when it comes to performance testing. When it comes to the battery life, competitive mode is indeed turned on by default, which I also would recommend just leaving it at that. And with that competitive mode turned on and 4K as well, you will definitely have to charge your mouse at least every other or every third day, depending on how much you actually play. If you want to mod your mouse and use it at 4K, I probably would recommend sticking with the stock battery or going for a 250 mAh. I went for 150 mAh, and on 4K I could barely play an evening, but I also personally don't care about 4K polling rate, so I simply stick to 1K, especially because I play Fortnite, which is incredibly volatile when it comes to 4K performance, so I prefer my mice just to be stuck on 1K with no issues at all that will bother me. Now let's get into this VAXEE PB mousepad. I didn't ask for it, but it appeared on my doorstep, so I was like, man, I'll just include it in this video. This mousepad is a whopping 60 euros. It comes shipped flat, but the dimensions are 480 by 400, which is really weird. I often find myself edging this part of the mousepad because it is only 480 wide, and compared to other enthusiast mousepads that are about 490 or 500 in width, it is definitely annoying. And here's the other issue. This mousepad is 5mm thick. Normally that's not an issue if you have really good stitched edges or it is a square pad that you can align at the edge of your desk, but because this is only 400mm high, if I were to align it at the edge of my desk, this is where my mouse would be. This is simply unusable this way because my top skate would be over the edge of the mousepad instantly, and my elbow is not on the desk. And now what you'll probably think is like, okay, then you'll just put the mousepad here and play with it like that, right? It's 5mm and it has no stitched edges, so what you're constantly grinding on is this edge right here, and because it is up 5mm high, it is very annoying. Now I will say that the surface and this base experience is fucking awesome. It is a very balanced control type surface that is slightly faster than the VAXEE PA. Overall, a perfect all-around surface that is very smooth, similar to the likes of the Speed on the Saturn, for example. And due to the silicone on this base, this pad is very firm, super consistent. The surface is overall insanely smooth and just a joy to play on. But here's the thing. The sizing is definitely not for everyone in our enthusiast scene. It's 5mm high, the edge is super annoying, and it is 60 euros almost. And that is why I simply cannot recommend this thing. And you know what sucks even more? VAXEE has already stated that there are no other larger dimensions currently in the works. So here's my feedback to VAXEE. Please make a square version of your pad 500 by 500 because there's so many in the aiming community that want to use the entire pad under your desk, align it at the edge of the desk, and just put their arm on it. Here's a huge poll that I did on Twitter so you can see that I'm not just talking shit. And as you can see, you need to do at least a 490 by 420 pad at this point. But in my personal opinion, in our scene, of course, VAXEE is not just for our scene. VAXEE is an esports focused brand. I would definitely make both sizes. A rectangular one that is bigger and also a square one. And then please get rid of this edge. VAXEE has already announced their new upcoming mouse pad, which is the VAXEE PC. And that one has a new edging technique. I don't know exactly what the surface will be like on that one, but if they can port that sort of edge over to their other mouse pads, that would definitely be way more comfortable. Other than that, it's an amazing pad due to the firm silicone base, and I hope that there will be a great revision in the future. Now, when it comes to my personal opinion about these mice, I was definitely surprised by how much I enjoyed the NP-01 because I thought it was going to be way too big for me. However, it just creates this insanely stable feeling, this locked in feeling without being too restrictive like I have on the U2. So if you want something to simply lock in and be really stable with, definitely go for the NP-01. And if you think that the NP-01's shape would be something for you and you want to experience how awesome this shape actually fucking feels like when you hold it, it really does feel like I'm kind of holding a pencil when aiming. It's just this very unique take on a shape that I really enjoy because it is pretty thin as well. I can definitely recommend it, but here's the thing. These mice are 150 euros. In my personal opinion, I could never spend that much on a mouse that still weighs 70 grams. If I were you, I would probably wait until they make their new versions, which will not only be lighter, but also hopefully re-engineered and improve on these issues that they have right now, since I do think that you could spend your money a lot better right now, especially with the Inca G Hero. Now, I'm not saying VAXEE to lower their prices or anything like that because it makes no sense to compare VAXEE to a Chinese brand, since they can manufacture and develop their mice at a much lower price and don't have to deal with huge import fees and sell out of Portugal and stuff like that. But I'm simply recommending the consumer at this point to probably not go for it unless you're dead set on these shapes and you really want something like this. But since we don't have a confirmation on when these lighter weight models will arrive in the future, it is simply up to you. The only reason why I don't use my NP-01s as much is just because I don't enjoy the click experience, especially because of not only that post travel, but also because if you click into the side of the mouse click here, you kind of dive into the shell on this other side here. It is overall just a pretty inconsistent experience, and I don't enjoy personally too much, but then again, 95% of you guys picking this mouse up would probably not consider this an issue. I'm personally just really freaking happy that VAXEE sent me these products out because it was something that I was incredibly interested in checking out. So huge thank you to VAXEE for giving me this opportunity. But at this price point, it's simply up to you. But yeah, I guess we'll go into the conclusion here. So, who is this mouse for? If you're schizo about your wireless performance, these mice are definitely for you. And if you want to experience what real wireless 4K actually feels like, this is also for you. There are so many Chinese Mickey Mouse implementations, and this is definitely not one of them. But then again, I personally do not care about 4K. I care much more about an insanely consistent and super high-speed 1K performance, mainly due to the games I play, but also because I'm not that schizo and I also play on a 240Hz panel. I can definitely also recommend these mice to you if these shape look attractive to you and they align with your hand size, which is either 19 by 10 or 20 by 10 or 20 by 11 for the NP-01s, and if you prefer smaller mice for a claw grip, and then everything bigger than that, or if you want that really locked in feeling, the NP-01. Of course, you can also palm grip the NP-01, but since I also have to tell you who these mice are not for, they are not for you if you are broke. These mice are really, really expensive, but that is definitely because they are insanely esports focused and competing directly against brands like Razer. And I probably also wouldn't recommend it for a fingertip grip, even though you can definitely use it, but I simply don't know what it would be like to actually main it with a fingertip grip in an asymmetrical shape. Let me know down in the comments below if you're one of those people. And the VAXEE PB for almost anybody of you, I simply cannot recommend due to these several reasons that I've already listed in my PB section of this video. But yeah, that's about it for this video. Yet again, huge thanks to VAXEE for sending these things out. I can't wait to see what you cook up in the future. I'm super hyped to see these shapes reappear with completely revamped mice in the future, and also the other things that they're cooking on. If you at all enjoyed this content, definitely make sure to hit the subscribe button and the notification bell right next to it to be notified for any of my upcoming enthusiast reviews. So I'll see you guys very soon. You change mouse skates and it's GG.